To all of our viewers, welcome, and thank you for tuning in to WOWL Channel 16. Your patronage is always appreciated. Today's program is the 2012 November election special, featuring candidates for both U.S. Congress and the Blaine House in Augusta. Before we begin, I'd like to apologize for the major continuity flaw you're about to witness. These interviews were all filmed on different days, and it's a bit hard to have the same items available in a wardrobe every day. Hopefully this won't turn anyone off of the program. Also on tap are the bond issues. Thank you for continuing to tune into our election special. We're here today with Maine House of Representatives candidate J.J. Roy. Mr. Roy, thank you for joining us today.
Great, James. Thanks for having me.
To start everything off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, things of that nature? What do you do for a living?
Yep, absolutely. I'm, like you said, my name is Jonathan Roy. I live in Frenchville. I have three kids, ages 10, 8, and 7. I work here in Madawaska at Ridgewood Estates. It's a family business I help manage, and also another business in Fort Kent, Crosswinds Residential Care. I'm a Wisdom graduate of '93, and I went to college. I did my college years at Bowdoin College and Northeastern University, and came back to the Valley about 11 years ago, and I've been here ever since.
Now you mentioned you run residential facilities here in Fort Kent. So what leads a residential care administrator, I guess, to run for the district's House seat?
Yeah, I think for me it was it was something that happened about probably a year and a half ago. I just started taking an interest in local politics and kind of separating what happens locally on the national scale and focusing in on local issues and the state of Maine. And never really thought I'd be in the political arena, but at the same time, didn't rule out that idea. And for me, just seeing a lot of people and working with a lot of people, and the two businesses, and being a big part of the community, felt like I want to represent and be the voice for District 2 down in Augusta. So that's how that all started, and since then I've gained excellent momentum and look to encourage everybody to get out there and vote, but also to give people a choice this time around, and I'm hoping I'm the choice.
Yeah, so it's not the same person every time.
Right.
Now it seems every election that comes around, conditions are always changing back and forth, Democrat to Republican, in not only on the national scale in Congress, but at the State House too. So after the elections are over with, even if your party or the other party has a major advantage against the other, how do you hope to maintain bipartisanship in the State House?
Right, I think that's key, and that's something I believe I can I could bring to the area. I mean, bipartisanship is how things get done. Just because you identify with one party doesn't necessarily mean you need to vote party lines all the time, and I think that's a big problem, in politics, period. So I'm hoping that I can, I'm the guy that I believe I'm level-headed, and I can hopefully bring that common sense, to Augusta, where just because I identify with one party doesn't mean you're voting along party lines. You should be really in tune with what the people need, and people over party is something I believe in.
Yeah. Now, being from the St. John, you know that we're a bit cut off from the other Maine. How do you plan on successfully serving this district in addition to the other parts of Maine, knowing that it has such a diverse population that is a bit different than maybe the Portland area, the Bangor area?
Yeah, for me, I truly love it up here. That's why I came back. I like the Four Seasons. I like the pace of life. But it's difficult running a business and even living up here. I wonder how people do it with price of oil, price of gas, health insurance is a big issue for me. How are people able to make it, and what will our younger people do, once they graduate and move on? So I do believe that, obviously we have challenges up here, and I think it's time to deal with those head on, and that's one thing I hope I can bring to Augusta as a fresh perspective, maybe my energy, my youth, in the hopes of making things more livable around here. I mean, we need jobs. Jobs is the underlying factor, and I believe strongly in an economy that provides opportunity for people. And if anything I can get out of this, it would be hopes that we could build our northern Maine economy.
Yeah. Now, hopefully this isn't what everyone's tuning in for, but could you explain why you're qualified, maybe more so than your opponent, to represent the district in Augusta?
Yeah, I think, I'm trying not to, from the day I decided to run, I'm not really focused on talking too much about my opponent. I think everybody does that, and I'm not doing that, and I'm choosing not to. As far as qualifications, I mean, I'm new to the political arena, and that's something that I believe gives me the advantage, because I see it as oftentimes, we got folks that make a career out of politics, and maybe that allows them to lose sight a little bit of what truly matters, and I believe in that notion that citizens should govern. Yeah. And I see myself as being fully integrated into the community, with work and kids and everything else I do. So I think that gives me a leg up.
Now, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add about the campaign, about the studio, about the town? I don't know, anything? Just anything?
The studio is great. It's a nice studio. I think, for me, like I said, I'm gaining some good momentum. I feel I need to continue to get my name out there and meet with people. I've kind of begun that here as of late, going door to door and just talking to people. And I encourage people to reach out to me, if they have any questions or concerns, because that's really going to be the key factor is learning what the different concerns are, amongst different age groups, local citizens and whatnot. So I think that's what I want voters to know, that this year they have a choice. And not to get too caught up on what's happening at the national level, but and parties in general, but to just vote for the candidate they feel good about. And I hope I get your vote.
Yeah. Now, that's about all the time we have for today. Mr. Roy, we really appreciate you being able to come into the studio today. I know your schedule must be a bit busy with both facilities and even campaigning and all that. But we appreciate you coming into the studio.
Great. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for tuning in. Welcome back to our election special, and thank you for continuing to tune in. We're here today with Maine House District 2 Representative Ken Therault. Mr. Therault, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
First and foremost, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, things of that nature?
Okay. I'm a resident of Madawaska, originally so-called lived in the St. John Valley all my life, except for the years that I served in the service. And I was born in Wallagrass, Maine, on a farm with my family. We did potato harvesting and planting and those kinds of things. And then after some time, I left the farm and came to work at the paper mill here in Madawaska. And so I spent close to 40 years working in the paper mill. I was a labor leader in the paper mill. I also am a veteran. I have served during the Vietnam era, and I am a Legion member. I am a Knights of Columbus. I'm in the 4th degree. Also, I was the Grand Knight of the organization here in Madawaska. I have worked with the young people. I Little League coach. Did work in the hockey group when we had Pee Wee hockey here. And so I've been very busy with all those things. I am an outdoor person, fishing, hunting, really love to go out and take photos of the birds now more so, that kind of thing. So I love the area and am pleased to be here with you today.
Now, you have served 3 terms in the Maine House?
That's right. I have given you 6 years of service.
So after 3 terms, why is it that you chose to run for re-election for our district's House seat?
Well, there's always things that are left undone, and this last term, we, the Democrats, which I am a Democrat, have been so-called not in the majority, and so therefore we have less input in what happens. And this time around, the Republican Party, had the governor's office, the Senate, and the House. So therefore, everything was driven in that way. We're hoping at some time maybe that there will be some changes, and so we do have a number of things that we need to be looking at here in the future. So therefore, that's why I am running again. And besides, I'm also very proud of the fact that I am representing District 2. I love the area, I love the people, and I look forward to doing it again.
So you had mentioned conditions changing to heavily favor Republicans in this last election, in the midterm election. That brings me to my next question. With conditions always changing drastically in the political climate, it seems that they're always going back and forth from Democrat to Republican. How do you hope to maintain bipartisanship in the State House after the elections are over with, even if your party or the other has a major advantage?
Well, when you look at things, myself, I am a moderate person. I believe in being moderate simply because if it's going to benefit the area that I represent, those areas in the St. John Valley, the Madawaska, Fringeville, St. Agathe, and Sinclair, New Canada, those areas, Stockholm, those areas are what I am responsible for, the people that live there. And I cannot just go along with things that might be happening in a different manner in a different part of the state. So therefore, my responsibilities are to my people. For an example, there may have been some items that my party went along with, but I voted the other way. Yeah. Sales tax issues and those kinds of things was not a popular thing to do, but it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Now, being from the St. John, we're a bit cut off from the other Maine, as some people call it. How do you plan on successfully serving this district, knowing that it has such a diverse population, different from the other parts of Maine? Or are you able to serve not only this portion of Maine, but Maine as a whole?
Well, you're always looking at things that are going to be affecting your area and how it's going to be perceived and how it affects it. For an example, there were changes made in healthcare. Healthcare reform came out, and because of the way that it was done, I believe some people didn't quite understand the situation. Now, the way this whole thing works is that if you're from the rural area and you have an older population, which we do, the small businesses and those people will get to pay a higher premium on insurances. Whereas they've turned the tables around on us, whereby if you're from southern Maine, the Portland area, where the population is much younger and the higher numbers, their rates have gone down. So that's one area where things have changed that I feel are not good for us. So therefore, we need to try to make that change. We need to go back and revisit and change that.
Yeah. Now, could you explain why you're qualified, maybe more so than your opponent, to represent our district in Augusta?
Well, the only thing I can say basically is that I served for 6 years. Yeah. I figured in that much I have the experience, and also I've made some. I've met some people there that are there, and they're still going to be there. It's a lot of this. What's happening here is when you go out there, you meet people, you work with them, and later on in years, they're going to come back to see you, and they're going to be there to help you. And that's part of this whole. This is part of this whole political situation. Knowing the people, getting them to understand your situations, and then moving on from there. As far as my opponent, I don't know him that well. I know that he's involved in a lot of different things in the community, and I do not have anything to say adversely about him at all.
Now, before we go, because I think we've kind of summed up the political aspect a little bit. I think we've done that quite nicely. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about your campaign, about your work in Augusta, just anything at all?
Well, basically, one of the things that I'd like to be able to tell the voters is that one of the items that I'm very proud of was the salvaging of the railroad line here from Brownville Junction up to the Madawaska line. We're not completely done with that yet. We would like to have had some other changes that are coming up. But in that in itself, we had a chance of losing 1,700 jobs here in this area. But because we went out to a referendum vote, I sponsored the bill initially because I felt that if we lost that particular part of the equation here in our area, we were going to be hurting from it. Yeah. And so even people who had trucking outfits called me and said, make sure that this doesn't happen because it's going to hurt the area. So we went from about 35 people to now operating with 60 people employed on that rail line. And one of the other things that's happened is we were able to get some money from the federal government for repairs on that line to a total amount of about $10.5 million. So therefore, all in all, we also had some help from the federal people on this issue. But all in all, I just want to say thank you to the people in this area that worked so hard for this, and I think I look at that as one of my accomplishments. And so therefore, that's one of the reasons why I feel that, you know, I should be able to go back, keep the momentum going, and hopefully we can come up with some new ideas in being able to get more employment for our people here in the area.
Well, I think that that wraps everything up. I don't have any more questions. Mr. Terry, we'd like to thank you for being here today, and yes, we at the studio would like to wish you the best of luck in the elections.
Thank you, and I would just like to add that I would hope that people don't forget November 6th is your day to vote, and by chance, if you need to get an absentee ballot, you can go today and pick one up at your local town office. All right. And I thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. We're sitting down today with Maine Senate candidate and current District 4 Representative Peter Edgecomb. Representative Edgecomb, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
First and foremost, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, things of that nature?
James, I was born in a family of 10 kids on a potato and livestock farm in Limestone, which was located right on the Canadian border. And as a young boy, when there's a family of 10, we all had to help with the farm work, the livestock, from being able to milk a cow at age 9 to, as a freshman in high school, I actually operated the first commercially built potato harvester that was made and built in Limestone. And after college, well, actually during college, James, I financed my way through college with a flock of about 200 layers of chickens, and had an egg route, and also customers. After school, or after college at the University of Maine, I became a teacher of agriculture, and from there, I believe this is where you want, just in my younger years, or your question is for?
Just kind of throughout your entire life, like maybe how you got where you are now.
Okay. Having always been interested in politics and actually serving on the Caribou City Council, I also today serve as the chairman of the Education Committee. Actually, I was a lead on the committee, but I am the chair of the Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry Committee in the legislature. And I did serve one term also on natural resources.
Okay. Well, we know that you already hold a State House position, so why is it that you chose to run for the District 35 Senate seat?
Well, it's an opportunity to serve the public. And I think as a former teacher, having been 20 years in the classroom as a teacher, and you know, as an educator, you like to help students and you like them to succeed. But I think a big part of being a legislator is being able to serve the public when they have a problem or a concern. You know, you like to be able to help them out. And certainly you can do that as a legislator. You know, even back in the days I was in high school, congratulations on your leadership position that you have here, but I was also president of the student council and government, again, getting onto the Caribou City Council, like I mentioned. Also, it's just when you get into an elected position, it's always nice to continue doing that as long as you have something to offer.
Yeah. Now, speaking of helping people out, up here in the St. John, where we're a little bit cut off from the other parts of Maine, if you hadn't noticed from your drive up here. So how do you plan on successfully serving this entire district, knowing that it has such a diverse population, maybe a little bit different than the rest of Maine?
Yeah. Well, first, James, if you're referring to the French culture, for example, I personally, I have, out of my 4 grandparents, 3 of them are French. My mother being Willette, named after Pete Levesque, my grandfather, and Bellefleur was also a family name. And growing up, I was around French conversations, except my mother, who understood French completely, just would not speak French because it was drilled into her not to do that when she was in school. But and then having worked in the Valley and being around the culture, matter of fact, hearing some of the expressions, it really was interesting to me, things that I'd heard and expressions that I used myself when I was younger. They just came back to life here, hearing again some of the expressions that were used when I was younger. Yeah. So I think that I have a good background and understanding with all the family meetings and in the culture that was still strong in my family when growing up. For example, my mother was Catholic, and of course she didn't serve meat on Friday, just as an example. And some of the very things that happened in the Valley. Yeah,
like I know when my father was growing up in Van Buren, he wasn't allowed to speak French in school, so kind of the same thing going on.
Yeah. That's too bad. I really feel badly about that.
It's kind of, made a comeback now. We teach it in schools, and so it's allowed now there.
Good.
Now to get a little bit more political. Conditions, every 2 years it's this way and that way. They're always changing in the political climate. How do you hope to maintain bipartisanship in the State House after the elections are over with, even if your party or the other party has a major advantage?
Okay, good question. I'm glad you asked that, James, because I think that as politicians go to Augusta and people think it's party in one side and the other, and you have your own issues. Yeah. When we go to Augusta, we need to learn to work together. And I do that. I have friends on the other side of the aisle, and if there is a bill that's introduced that is important to Aroostook County and the state of Maine, I support it. I don't care which party sponsored the bill. An example, the mining bill that creates jobs, and that was sponsored by a Democrat. And I've supported that, and even in my caucus spoke toward it to help it become a law, so that we can at least look into it. That's not it's not concluded that we will end that way, but we had to change a lot of the regulations that are now in effect so that we could do that.
Yeah. I think, on a national level, it's a bit more complicated. People kind of need to understand that the parties really aren't so different. They're different on a few issues, but they're both there for the benefit of the American people, and I think that's what kind of gets looked over a little bit.
And just let me add, James, also, I've had folks from the other side of the aisle say, Peter, they knew I was a former school superintendent, and they personally come to me and said, I listened to your debate and I couldn't decide on this issue, and thank you, you did a good job on the debate, and I'm going to vote for it, or I'm going to vote against it. And they respect my position and on that particular issue because of my background, having taught a total of 39 years in education, with 20 being in the classroom and 10 as the vocational director in the Valley. That made to them, they thought that was a valuable background to be able to make a good vote.
Yeah. So this is probably the most important part. That's why we're all here there. Could you explain why you're qualified, maybe more so than your opponent, to represent our district in Augusta?
Well, James, let me say that when I'm out campaigning, I prefer not to be talking about my opponent, and I don't want to really say anything on that issue. Because again, if we go to Augusta and pass legislation and we make it on my opponent is this way, or my opponent favors or does not favor something, we could hurt the entire state of Maine as well as our county by taking sides. So I really prefer not to say anything about my opponent, because I actually prefer to go there and I let him run his campaign, James, and I'll run mine.
Yeah.
And that's the fairest way to do it.
Yeah. Now, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add about your campaign, about the Valley, about yourself? Is there just anything you'd like to add?
Well, I truly appreciate you inviting me, and it's a joy to get back here and to see some of the friends that I've had from the past and I haven't seen in some time, and they're extremely happy to be able to remind me of who they were and where I knew them from. It happened again just this morning. Also, let me mention also for students that on my work in Augusta, having a bill that actually students might be interested in. You now are allowed to salute the flag and say the Pledge of Allegiance, and every school must offer that opportunity to students and veterans. We're at that meeting at the Education Committee when we had a work session on that bill and a public hearing on it, and they did an excellent job, and I was happy to be able to help get that bill passed. But I will. Let's go to the next question.
Well, that's about all the time we have. It's been great to have you here. Would like to wish you luck with the campaign and with the election.
All right.
Thank you for sitting down with us.
Thank
today.
you, and it was my joy being here. I appreciate you inviting me.
Welcome back to our Channel 16 election special. We're here today with State Senator Troy Jackson, who is campaigning for re-election. Senator Jackson, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
First and foremost, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, stuff like that?
Actually, I've lived in a lot of towns here in Worcester County, but for the most part, I live in Allagash. That's where I've built a home, and me and my wife and youngest son live. And I was born and raised in St. John Valley. Lived in Fort Kent for a number of years also, but Allagash is where I call home now.
Yeah. So why is it that you chose to run for the District 35 Senate seat?
I got involved in politics, I think back in '98 over labor issues. I was concerned about the way things were going. Instead of being upset and frustrated about it, I chose to try and run for politics and do something, to try and help the area. I mean, like I said, I'm from here. I'd like to see this place do better. And, I just thought that instead of talking about it, I'd try and actually do something to help.
Yeah. Now, since you're from northern Maine and you understand the conditions up here, kind of a bit of what it's like, how do you plan on lobbying for northern Maine in the state Senate?
Well, I think that, the people that serve in the legislature with me are all, for the most part, good, honest people that, are no different than anyone else. And I think if you're honest with them, you treat them with respect, like you'd want to be treated. I think for the most part, they respond to you. And, I've advocated for a number of things in northern Maine, and, we've always had pretty good luck despite having, a small population, which causes us to have less representatives. I think for the most part, we've done a lot to try and help Worcester County with such small numbers. But I think the biggest thing is just being honest with people and telling the truth, and people respond to that.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned earlier that from a younger age, you had figured that you weren't going to just complain about what was going on. You were going to get involved in politics. Since the people around, for the people up here, some of the younger generation, how would you encourage them to get involved in politics like you did?
Well, I think, one thing is that I didn't really even understand how the whole process worked until really my early 30s. I'd never been to Augusta or anything like that. And I think that, myself, Representative Therault, and others, just if people ever want to come down and go around and see how Augusta works. That would be one way that would be, really eye-opening and really easy for people to do, other than the travel. But I mean, I think even getting involved in your town here, the town council, things like that, voting, paying attention. I mean, a lot of times people get so frustrated with the way things are going, they just think it doesn't matter, that there's nothing that they can do. But I think that people paying attention and taking an active role, it doesn't have to be on state-wide politics like we're doing, but it may end up being that. I just think that people need to take more of an interest into that and get involved, and we do see that more now than ever. I think Maine is one of the states that show the most people voting in it, and that's a good thing.
Now, continuing with the politics, conditions, it seems every 2 years, are always, swaying from left to right, Democrat to Republican. So how do you hope to maintain bipartisanship in the State House after the elections are over with, even if your party or the opponent's party, or the other party, I should say, has a major advantage?
Well, I think, I've proven that, just recently. I mean, in the state Senate, we had, a considerable advantage going to the Republicans. I'm a Democrat, and we were in the minority. We did some good things. We passed a bill to give funding to the Acadian Congress. I think that, again, getting back to, if you're honest with people and make valid arguments, many times they'll respond to that. There's certainly things that I believe in. I believe in, deeply, that I won't, vary from. I think even in those times, people respect that. They know that, you're being honest and truthful, and you don't want to do anything that's going to hurt your area. That's one thing that I've never had a trouble with. When I was chairman of the Labor Committee, Republicans would come to me with issues that they thought were important, and I always, one of the things that I've learned through this whole process is, even if you think that you have your mind made up, you always should listen to the other side, because many times they can help you improve an idea, and I don't ever believe that I know all the answers, so I always listen to people, and I think people understand that I'm willing to listen. I think that's why I've done fairly well as far as being in the minority this past session, is because people know that I listened to them when I was in the majority.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important to realize that party identity doesn't trump, where you're from, helping out where you're from.
Absolutely.
Just helping people in general rather than helping out your political group.
Absolutely.
So this is probably the most important question. I guess it's what everyone is tuning in for. Could you explain why you're qualified, maybe more so than your opponent, to represent the district in Augusta?
Well, I mean, I'm just a working class guy. I cut wood for a living whenever I'm not in the legislature, and I think at least for that group of people that go to work every day with the lunchbox or whatever, I know what it's like. I know that it's a very tough economy, that oil prices are extremely high, and people worry how to pay for those things. I don't know that I have all the answers to solve them, but I know that where they're coming from, and I've been a business owner. I understand how tough that is. I've definitely fought against some of the overburdensome regulations that we have here. I think in the end, the biggest thing is, I'm from here, not any one place. I'm just from here. I know people up and down St. John Valley and Aroostook County, and I haven't forgot those people. I never did. I'm always thinking about how this is going to help Aroostook County or hurt Aroostook County, and if I don't have that in the back of my mind all the time, then I'm doing something wrong, and so I always try and put myself in other people's shoes here in Aroostook County, and that's one thing that I'll never vary from.
Yeah. Now, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add about yourself, about the Valley, about anything?
Well, I think that there's a lot of things that happened in the last session that have not been good for Aroostook County, starting out from the same-day voter registration law that was passed in the last legislature. That was something that the voters luckily overturned, but I think that any time that you try and stifle people's ability to vote, that's not a good thing. And that's something that I didn't support, that was supported on the other side. The tax breaks that we gave out are going to help out the more wealthy people in the state, while the working class people aren't going to get those tax breaks to the same extreme. Yeah. I don't have a bit of problem with giving out tax breaks, but I think they should be equitable up and down the economic scale. And then finally, the health care law that we passed is the fact is that has blown up health insurance rates even more in Aroostook County than before, and many businesses that used to be able to supply those, even while the costs were great, have not been able to do that. And health care is something that is killing the U.S. economy. And those giveaways to health insurance companies is something that I don't support, and I understand how if you don't have health insurance, you're really in a bad position.
Yeah.
So those things, again, like I said, I haven't forgot what it's like here, so I make sure that I don't support those things that are going to hurt people up here.
Yeah. Now, we're out of time, but thank you for joining us today, Mr. Jackson, and we wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you. You did a great job.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for continuing to tune in to our election special. Today we're sitting down with Mr. Danny Dalton. Mr. Dalton, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me here.
First and foremost, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, stuff like that?
Sure. Originally, I'm from upstate New York, a little town called Messina on the St. Lawrence River. My background, I have 25 years in the federal government. I spent 10 years active duty, 8 years in reserves. I was a drug agent for 12 years, Pakistan, El Salvador, different parts of the country. And I went from there, I went to Iraq in 2005 and worked for the Department of State and also with the Department of Army as an intel advisor. From Iraq, I came back to the United States in 2008, and I decided, because of friends and sources of information that I had developed over in these different areas that were telling me that information wasn't being acted on, I developed a private company of my own to provide intelligence information to different law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies. And in 2010, I went and I worked for the Department of Homeland Security for the director underneath the Napolitano for law enforcement information sharing initiatives.
So it's the U.S. Senate seat you're running for, right?
That's correct. United States Senate seat for Olympia Snow's seat.
So why is it that you chose to run for that Senate seat?
Well, basically, I think from my 25 years of experience in the federal government, what I experienced there was a gross mismanagement of resources, and there's so much waste going on that can be addressed. I think that's one of the main reasons. The second reason I'm running is because I don't think we're being represented properly by our two-party system. I think our two-party system is broke. I don't think that they're representing us per se. They're representing special interests and big business and lobby groups who are undermining our reform efforts in Congress, such as health care, such as Wall Street reform, such as immigration reform. We're not getting down to the nuts and bolts of these issues, and we're being distracted from pressure from these lobbies groups, such as the Chamber of Commerce and such as Big Pharma, who basically undermined Mr. Obama, President Obama's efforts and Congress's efforts in trying to have affordable access to health care. Yeah. And in this state, when I came back from Iraq, I tried to meet with my two senators here, one who was on the Department of Homeland Security Committee, with our Homeland Security Committee and Government Affairs, Senator Collins, and also try to meet with Senator Snow's office. And I was able to meet with her staff regarding very compelling, very important issues about our country's safety and our ability to fight terrorism and narco trafficking. I wasn't able to do that, okay? So when a constituent of a state is not able to meet with his representatives or her representatives about an issue that is so important as terrorism in Afghanistan or multi-ton drug traffickers that are operating within the United States, and I'm not able to meet with my with my representatives, specifically Senator Snowe and Senator Collins, then I felt the only thing I could do at that point was run for the United States Senate myself.
Yeah. Now, as you know, Senator Snowe was one of the more beloved legislators we've had in Maine, and she had a pretty well-proven track record of bipartisanship. How do you planning on continuing that legacy, or do you have your own ideas for leadership?
Well, I think definitely we need to have a consensus within our Congress to drive forward the proposals that are going to be best for our country, such as tax reform, health care reform, in a positive, more effective manner. When Senator Snowe left and she stated that she's never seen Congress at this level of dysfunction, it's not because this hasn't been going on for decades, because from the time I was this tall, not as even younger than you, we've had the same issues on board, okay? We've had to deal with immigration, we've had to health care, we've needed to reform, we needed to reform our tax code, our intelligence agencies have been messed up. But what happens is, and what's always happened, is the two parties tacitly agree not to address these issues. That's what have you ever heard of the third rail of politics? The third rail of politics is the rail you don't touch. When you go down the subways, there's a third rail. You don't touch that because it's going to kill you. So what our representatives are actually afraid of is not being reelected. Okay? They're not willing to stand up to the special interests and the lobbyists to get the job done, and so they've been pushing these things aside to make sure that they were going to be reelected. Now we're at a crisis. Okay, all these different areas we're at a crisis level, with Wall Street collapsing, with our tax code riddled like a piece of Swiss cheese with loopholes. We have to address these issues and be serious about that. And the only way we can get serious about that is to make sure our two parties who are scared to death, okay, at this point, pay attention to the voters and make sure that they're going to be addressing the issues and listening to the voters, not to the Chamber of Commerce or Big Pharma or some other lobby group that only gives us half of what we need to have in order to straighten out these problems, such as health reform and things like that.
Now you have a business in Bath, and we're up in the St. John Valley here for this interview. So as you know, Maine is has a bit of a diverse population. So how do you think you can serve such a mixed group, and how do you plan to do so?
My role as a senator is going to be to facilitate what the state needs to develop here, whether or not it's education, healthcare, the economy. The state legislature and the governor have to come up with their own programs that need to be supported by our federal representatives, which I will be a facilitator for that. And I think one of the best ways I could facilitate that is to have realistic and proven answers to the problems that we face, one of which is our tax code. Okay, many experts, probably most experts, believe that the tax code that we should have, the reform that we should have, is a consumption tax put onto our goods during the manufacturing process. Basically, it's a value-added tax. If we have this tax system, which the reason that we don't have it is because what the experts do say is, even though it's the best system to have, it's not politically viable. What that means is our two parties don't have a backbone. That's what not politically viable means. Okay. Now, what that consumption tax does is allows our exports to be more competitive. What happens overseas, we have 150 countries that have a value-added tax, including Canada. When you open up trade agreements with a country such as Canada, and we have free trade, what Canada has done is they put a 5% tax on their goods. Okay, when they send those goods to export to the United States, they take that 5% tax off, so that those goods come into the United States untaxed. Now, when we sell to Canada, we have what is called a corporate income tax, okay, at a 35% level. So our goods are taxed before they get to Canada. When they get to Canada, Canada puts on their extra 5%. Okay, the same goes with China. China has 17%. Germany has 19%. They take the tax off, comes to the United States tax-free. We send our goods over there taxed. They add some more tax. What that has done is that has forced our corporations to try to find loopholes to get around those taxes. So in the 1950s, they were paying 30. Not all corporations can do that because they don't have the high-powered lawyers to do that. Yeah. They don't have the ability to park their profits overseas like they've done. Okay, so since 1950, the ability for us to collect those taxes has dropped from 35% to 7.9% from some of these big companies. Okay, so $1 trillion of profits from these companies that have been parked overseas. As soon as we develop a reform system with a value-added tax, which and get rid of the corporate income tax, that will allow all these companies to bring back that $1 trillion back into our economy, to jumpstart our economy back into the global market. Yeah. And I noticed that Governor LePage went over to China, okay, this past I think week, and met with the leaders over there. We have $270 million worth of exports that we export to China. We'd be even better off if we don't tax those goods before they get to China.
Yeah. So maybe the most important, could you explain why you're qualified, maybe more so than your opponents, to represent Maine nationally in the Senate?
Okay, for one thing is I spent 25 years in the federal government.
Yeah.
Okay, the agencies that I spent that time with, from multiple levels, different areas, different parts of the world, different parts of the country, those budgets, if you put them all together, compromise close to 50% of our discretionary budget. Yeah. None of the other candidates, except for maybe Mr. Summers, who doesn't seem to want to talk about the waste in the Department of Defense, know anything about those different agencies. Now, just for instance, one example of the waste that you see there, and an agency like the DEA, which I worked with, okay. The DEA, I'm working in El Salvador with one other agent, literally trying to stop cartels from taking those countries over. Prior to that, I'm in Albany, New York, investigating and trying to find someone to sell us a kilo of cocaine. Now, everyone knows that that's in management or any place in business that your most important resource is your manpower. If you're going to allocate your resource where you have 2 agents in El Salvador, okay, and I'm in Albany, New York with 8 agents trying to find a kilo of cocaine, do you think we're getting our money's worth? No, we're not. No, we're not getting our money's worth in that agency. We're not getting our money's worth in the FBI, because if you look at the FBI and how incapable they are, you go to my website, daltonsenate.com, daltonsenate.com, easy to remember, daltonsenate.com. If you do that and you go to the 9/11 section, you're going to see 2 examples of the ineffectiveness of our agencies that are putting our family members and our country at risk. Now, there's been several people, and I don't know how many there are, which I apologize not knowing the number, of Maine residents have been killed in Afghanistan and Iraq, correct? Okay, and I know some of those family members personally, because when I went around to pick up 4,000 signatures, okay, to get on the ballot, which I did personally, I got every one of those signatures myself. I talked to all those people myself. I didn't pay somebody $1.50 to go get that name, okay? I did it myself, and I talked to those people. They were upset about our political system, when I go to my senators and I try to point out what I show on my website at daltonsenate.com under the 9/11 tab, okay, and it shows something like the President of Afghanistan's brother's heroin lab, okay, who's pumping out hundreds of kilos of heroin that ends up in our country, and we're not going to address it. When I go to the U.S. Attorney's office and I tell a U.S. Attorney, hey, I got the evidence to indict Karzai's brother, and he says it's too political. Well, there's nothing too political when it comes to the safety of our country, our soldiers, the kids on this street, okay? And that's what I did for 25 years. I risked my life, I risked everything I have to make sure that my kids, my grandchildren, the kids here in this school, and the people in this country are safe. And when I see that that we're going to overlook those things for political reasons, I have to stand up and do as much as I can, and that's why I'm here.
Now, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add about your campaign, about the Valley, school, anything?
Well, there's so many different issues that we're facing right now. But I think the most important thing we need to do is find the revenues to address the issues, to get the money back to the state, to help pay for the programs that we need, such as the schools, the education system, the healthcare system, and all the other social service benefits that we need. There's 4 things we need, the government needs to do. It needs to make sure our country's safe, and it needs to promote business to make sure that we're able to have an economy that generates the revenue in order to have a healthy society, in order to have an educated society. That's what the businesses need, a healthy, educated society to compete globally. But we can only do that if we have the revenue. And we can only support these social programs to the level that we can afford. Right now, we can't afford anything. Yeah. So in order for us to bring money back into the state, we have to cut back on the waste. Now, I'd like to ask a question. Have we won a war yet? Okay. That you could, since World War II? I mean, we didn't win the Vietnam War, okay? We didn't win the Iraqi war. We spent $2 or $3 trillion just about bankrupt our country. Yeah. We're not winning the Afghan war, okay? If we're spending $700 billion on our military, shouldn't we be asking what are they capable of doing? Yeah. I know there's a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of politics involved that make it so that our military isn't capable of doing the job they need to do. But that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of waste. And if we're not going to allow them to do something, we shouldn't be funding programs that we're not going to allow them to use. So what we need to do is make sure we're not wasting any more money than we have to, because a few $1 billion here, a few $1 billion here makes a big difference to a state like Maine. And there's so much waste when it comes to the military-industrial complex, I can't tell you. And I feel for everybody that's in the military. The reason I'm here is I'm trying to protect the people that are over there now. And I think it's very important that we do that, and we take a look at these programs that are just boondoggles and we're not getting our money's worth. And the last thing is we need to reform our tax code, okay? And the way to reform our tax code is listen to the experts, because the experts are telling us that the value-added tax, a consumption tax, do away with the corporate income tax and the other income tax, except for maybe at a higher level, is the way to jumpstart our economy, okay? So, but thank you very much.
Well, that's about all the time we have.
Okay.
I know it's a long ride up here, but we really appreciate having you on the show.
It was a beautiful ride.
Best of luck in the election.
Thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you for tuning in.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back to our election special. We're sitting down today with U.S. Senate candidate and current state senator from District 7, Cynthia Dill. Mrs. Dill, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, James.
Now, first and foremost, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, things of that nature, why you're running?
Sure. I'm 47 years old. I live in Cape Elizabeth with my husband Tom and 2 kids, Harrison and Isabel. Harrison's a senior at Cape Elizabeth High School. Isabel is a sophomore. I grew up in New England. I went to college in Vermont, went to law school in Boston, and moved to Maine in 1990, where I started practicing as a lawyer in Portland for 4 years before starting my own practice. Got involved in politics in 2005. Have served in the State House of Representatives, sitting right next to Representative Ken Therault, for 3 terms, and then in 2011 was elected to the State Senate, where I sit right next to Senator Jackson, and proudly represent the good people of District 7, which is South Portland, Cape Elizabeth, and part of Scarborough.
So why is it that you chose to run for the U.S. Senate seat versus re-election to the Maine Senate seat?
I got involved in the race when Olympia Snowe was everyone thought she was going to run for re-election, because as much as I admire Senator Snowe, I felt it was important to have somebody in the election that would bring to the debate issues that Maine working families really care for. I felt that the Republican Party was moving a little bit too far to the right and not paying attention to Maine's working families and small businesses. Of course, since I got in, she's gotten out, and now it's different. But I'm in this race because I believe we really need a new generation of leadership in Washington, and we need someone who's in touch with the challenges of Maine's families representing us in the United States Senate.
Now, speaking of Senator Snowe, this leads to my next question. She was one of the most beloved legislators we've had in Maine. I think most people can agree on that. And she had a track record of bipartisanship. How do you plan to continue that legacy, or do you have your own ideas for leadership?
Well, Maine has a really tremendous legacy of great senators, Margaret Chase Smith, Ed Muskie, George Mitchell, including Senator Snowe. And I aspire to follow in the footsteps of all these great leaders and always put the interests of Maine people ahead of any personal aspirations or political ideology. I do have a record of working across the aisle in the Maine legislature, and I will continue. And I pledge to the people of Maine, if I am honored to be elected, to continue in the tradition of Senator Snowe and represent this state with integrity, and certainly work with everyone who's trying to promote the common good.
Yeah. Now, and you drove up from Cape Elizabeth, which is a pretty fair ways away. So you've probably noticed that up here in the St. John Valley, we're a little bit cut off from the other parts of Maine. Do you think you can serve such a mixed population, knowing that Maine does have a very diverse people, a bunch of different cultures? How do you plan to serve, that diverse population?
Well, I should say I love Aroostook County. I've been here a number of times, and what I find is it is somewhat different. It's beautiful. There's lots of farms. Obviously, the open landscape is gorgeous. The connection to Canada is unique. However, the similarities that people in this county have with people everywhere is that they care about their family, they want a job that pays a fair wage, they want access to health care, they want their kids to get a good education, they want to protect the environment, they want a fair shot at the American dream. So I'm confident that I can serve the people of Aroostook County. I have been an advocate for rural Maine since day one in the legislature.
Yeah. Now, this is probably what some people are tuning in for. Could you explain why you're qualified, maybe more so than your opponents, to represent Maine nationally in the Senate? Why should you have their vote versus other candidates?
I believe that Maine people really need a strong voice in Washington, but also someone they can trust and someone they know what their values are. And I proudly am a member of the Democratic Party, and I'm making it perfectly plain that I'm going to caucus with the Democrats and support President Obama. I think President Obama is taking us on a path that's leading us out of this recession into the future that's going to rely on sustainable energy, promote working people, middle-class families, and I think that we need more women in the United States Senate. Right now, there's 17% of the United States Senate are women. That's the least representation of women in the entire developed world, including Afghanistan and Rwanda. So I believe that I represent a new generation of leadership, that I have the political, the professional, as well as the personal qualifications to serve. I'm the same age as Olympia Snowe, 47, when she went to the United States Senate. That's my age, and I believe that I have a track record of accomplishment. I have a vision. I'm very open and honest about where I stand. I'm accountable, transparent, and believe that I'm the most qualified candidate to support the president and to make sure that the Democrats in the United States Senate maintain a majority, so that if for some reason Mitt Romney wins and we have a Republican-led House of Representatives, that there's some firewall to what I consider to be a very extremist agenda on the part of the Republicans in Washington.
Now, we're running a little bit short on time here. I think the bell's about to ring. We are in a school setting here. So before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add about your campaign, about St. John, about the election in general? Just anything you'd like to add?
I would just like to add that it's a privilege and honor to be here, that if people want to learn more about me or my website, me or this campaign, they can go to the website www.cynthiadill.com. There are important issues that separate me from the other candidates, including the Bush tax cuts, environmental laws, social issues. So on the website, there's a contrast piece where people can see where I stand, where Angus King stands, where Charlie Summers stands, and really understand fully what's at stake in this election. And again, I just want to thank you for this opportunity.
There we go. There's the bell.
Good timing.
Seems we are out of time now. Mrs. Dill, we thank you for being on the program, and we wish you the best in the election.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in. I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about our bond referendum issues that will also be featured on the ballot this November. Question 1 is a citizens' initiative. It reads, do you want to allow the state of Maine to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples? Next, question 2, bond issue. It reads, do you favor an $11,300,000 bond issue to provide funds for capital to build a diagnostic facility for the University of Maine system, for capital improvements and equipment, including machine tool technology for the Maine Community College system, and for capital improvements and equipment at the Maine Maritime Academy? Question 3 is also a bond issue. It reads, do you favor a $5 million bond issue to purchase land and conservation easements statewide from the willing sellers of public land and water access, conservation, wildlife, or fish habitat and outdoor recreation, including hunting and fishing and deer wintering areas, and to preserve working farmland and working waterfronts to be matched by at least $5 million in private and public contributions? Question 4. Do you favor a $51,500,000 bond issue for improvements to highways and bridges, local roads, airports, and port facilities, as well as for funds for rail access, transit buses, and the Lifelight Foundation, which will make the state eligible for at least $105,600,000 in federal and other matching funds? Question 5. Do you favor a $7,925,000 bond issue to be expended over 2 years for revolving loan funds for drinking water systems and for wastewater treatment facilities, which will make the state eligible to secure $39,625,000 in federal grants? If you have any questions regarding the financial impact of these bond issues or a summary of the proposed legislation, please visit maine.gov for a voter's guide produced for you for free. And that was our array of candidates for office and proposed legislation. Bear in mind that these are not all of the candidates running, but all that were available to come on the show, and we appreciate their ability to come up to the school. What's important to bear in mind is that your vote is what will put these people in power. You are voting for your future leaders, so please, regardless of your party affiliation, just vote. It is the original and best way to express your beliefs, because complaining won't do anything for you once a person is in office. Vote, 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 we implore you. This is a presidential election, and the highest office in the country is up for grabs. The title Leader of the Free World wasn't thought of for nothing. No matter what these people may think, it's you that has the power to put them in office. So please, on November 6th, use that power. Election season is the season of the people. Decide who you want your leaders to be, and don't let other people decide for you. Thank you, and we hope to see you at the polls.